Hello and welcome to an episode of Atomic Vinyl Reviews. And today we're taking a look at the Bandai Premium Godzilla 1954 poster color version Bandai vinyl figure. So this is a nice medium-sized hard vinyl figure. He's made of a hard vinyl. He's quite light because he is actually hollow. And this particular version of Godzilla comes from the, of course, 1954 original film Gojira, and this specific figure is trying to capture the look of this Godzilla from the posters of the film where he was actually in color as opposed to the film where he was black and white. So hence he has a slightly brownish tint, as you can see on him here. Hopefully it's coming out nice and clear on camera. It is a nice subtle sort of a brown. It's obviously this Godzilla isn't going to be like a rainbow Godzilla, even though he is colored, but he does have some, some color tints here and there, like bits of brown all across his body. The interior of his mouth does have bone-colored teeth and a bit of red there, and so such and so forth. So this figure is actually quite hard to get at the moment, especially for a decent price. Even even the stock price that this thing was, the recommended retail price, I'd say is way too high, but for the prices it's going for now and the price I got it for, which is, I'm in the same boat as you guys. I got this thing way past the pre-order stage, and so this thing cost a lot, like way more than a Monster Arts. But when I just had to pick this thing up, because when I saw photos of this, I absolutely love the sculpt. Even though this is, a Bandai vinyl, it's made in that same way. It's a very simple sort of figure. The actual sculpt on this guy is immaculate. I love the detailing on it, and it's probably one of, if not the most accurate 1954 Godzilla we have. Aside from maybe some of those very very large X Plus figures, the gigantic ones, or some of those kits out there. But just in general, this is a very, very accurate 54, which is surprisingly hard to get. They always feel a little bit off to me. Even the 30 centimeter X Plus 54 figure, which I don't know if you can kind of see, but if I raise the camera, there he is up there. I'll bring him down in a sec to compare the two, but even that one isn't quite as accurate as this one, I'd say. I will compare him to some other figures like the Monster Arts one, which I think is the next best contender. Especially some of the detail work and the scaling is a little bit more accurate on that one. But just in general, this one is a beautiful figure. So let's talk about how he came packaged, because apparently that was a whole big deal. I don't know why in the advertising they talked a lot about the packaging for this guy, which is fitting because it's a very strange sort of packaging. Not for any other reason, but just that the box is huge for such a small figure. If you watch my unboxing of this thing, you would have seen that when I opened this box up, it was literally just this guy like pinned to the back of this cardboard sleeve, and the rest of it was just open air. It was really weird, but for whatever reason they chose to make this massive long box, which granted is a really beautiful, beautifully done box. You got photo of the figure here, and it's got this guy Sadao Iizuka, I believe that's how you pronounce it, did the paintwork and stuff to kind of make him look like he's doing his atomic breath. You can see those in some of the promotional shots, the actual dude painting it, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, just a brief overview of the box. The box also originally came in this shipping plain cardboard box container, which I will keep it in to keep it nice and safe and fresh and all that stuff for years to come. But yeah, if you're curious more about that, look at the unboxing video. But let's talk about the figure itself. So like I mentioned before, the sculpt on this guy is immaculate. I really love it. The scaling is nice and well defined, and even for this being a very simple sort of Bandai vinyl, which doesn't generally lend itself to really sharp and really well done details most of the time, I think this figure really pulls it off well. You'll also notice that this figure looks almost as if it's seamless. There is actually only one seam that I managed to find, and it's the tail here is actually a separate piece. So there's a little seam line that you can see here. But the rest of the body, even the spines, appear to be all one solid piece of vinyl. I say solid, I mean hollow, like one complete, unbroken piece of vinyl. It is hollow, like I said. This is a very light figure, so bear that in mind. So sculpt-wise, I think it is beautiful. You can really see the way it's sculpted to look like the suit with the crinkles along the belly here. He does have a very sort of square-looking shape front on, which is very accurate to the Godzilla from the film. But from the side, I think he looks really good, really dynamic, especially when you pose him like this. I think it's the exact same pose which you would see in the poster that this figure is referencing. So I'll quickly put up a little screenshot of that on screen so you guys can kind of see what this guy is actually meant to look like. You can see this guy pretty much matches that photo almost identically. I have noticed that some of the scaling isn't exactly perfect to what he looked like in that photo and in the film, such as some of the scaling on the chest here. Here there's more elongated strokes and stuff like that, and I think the knees are a little bit off, and just some tiny micro little details, but overall, just the overall sculpt is very accurate. It does kind of have some minor nitpicks about it, which is the spines, because it is made in this sort of a vinyl, they aren't quite as sharp and well defined as some other figures have the spines, particularly the Monster Arts version of this kaiju, which I'll bring in later, and some other ones like that. But I actually think the spines are slightly better done on this than the X Plus, which I'll talk about later on, like I said. Aside from that, the only minor thing is that some people might not particularly like is the eyes. So I'm going to bring in this guy a little closer to the camera and we can kind of talk about the eyes for a second. So from this angle, the eyes look great. This looks just like how he looked in the film, where he was sort of peering down at all the various people and the tanks and all that sort of stuff, the city. You know, just like he looked in the film. You see this little nice photo on this card here, which is actually another interesting thing I'll quickly talk about. So he does actually come with a classic sort of little card, just like all the classic Bandai vinyl figures do. And you see here we got Godzilla 2019, because, you know, figure was made in 2019, Bandai 2019, made in China. Of course, like most things, this guy's also made in China, even though it's a Japanese kaiju figure. That's fairly standard for these things. And we got the little copyright logo. So this is a cool nod to some of those vintage Bandai tags. Just as a side note. So strangely enough, he comes with a tag and a massive ass box, which is, I'd say, a little bit overkill, but whatever. It's still a cool little touch. But unfortunately, I would have put the tag personally on the other side of the figure, just because I actually like displaying him where this side of the figure is facing forwards this way. And the reason for that is actually the eyes, like I was just about to bring up. So here you see this eye is facing slightly off to the side. These two eyes are obviously peering this way. So he is kind of looking off to the side, and that makes sense. But unfortunately, I find he doesn't look quite as nice when he's facing this way. It still looks really good, and it's actually very believable, and this is not a mistake at all, because the actual pupils for the eyes are sculpted in to the sculpture. There's like some subtle lines that you can make out if you actually look really closely. So it is meant to be like this. But part of me would have preferred if the eyes were just kind of centered on both sides. But that might just be a personal preference thing, and I do actually respect that they did that at the same time, so it's kind of a mixed bag with that. But generally it lends to me not really wanting to pose him on this side, because he looks slightly less interesting, I'd say, than when his pupil is a little more centered like this. It kind of resembles the film a little bit more from recollection. I'll just give you guys a nice close-up look at the detailing on this thing. So he is actually not the biggest figure in the world. I was kind of disappointed at the size of this guy, to be honest, and I'll show you him next to some other figures in a sec. But regardless, the sculpt work and the detailing of this thing is marvelous. It's like I'm not gonna say it's at X plus levels, but for the size, yeah, it kind of is. Um, so they really did a great job. This figure is essentially kind of like if X Plus was mixed with a Bandai vinyl, like a standard sort of your typical Sofubi kind of Bandai vinyl, which I'll bring in for comparison, like I keep saying later on. So have a good look at the spines here. You can see down at the base of these spines, they're not glued in or anything by the looks of it. This is all one chunk of vinyl. Really beautifully done. Also, the paintwork on the spines is nicely airbrushed. It's all beautifully done. I don't actually really know how they would get the airbrush to do it so cleanly without getting it all over the backs of some of these spines where it's not wanted and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, they found a way and it turned out really nice. And here you see the issue with this tag. I really wish for display purposes it was on the other side, because then this side would be a little bit freed up, but I still like this tag, so I'm definitely not going to take this off. To me, this figure is 100% a collector's item, so I'm not in any way, shape, or form gonna try and, damage anything on it or remove the tag or anything like that. There you guys can see how the teeth on this guy are constructed. If we kind of have a look in his mouth here, you got a tiny bit of red in there, which, like I said, almost not noticeable from most angles, but it is there. You can see the teeth aren't individually sculpted. They're kind of on a block, but they are they stick out quite a bit from that block regardless. So they do look pretty effective, and they do look better than on some of the other figures that have this. Even I have this massive Banpresto figure, which I'll just bring in. Just the face of it, because it is actually broken. But it is the same Godzilla. This one was sculpted by Yuji Sakai. It's a really nice figure, but the face, I think, is a little bit off on this one. And actually, the teeth is one of the weakest elements on it, because it does have the same sort of block teeth that just have been painted. And it doesn't quite look as nice as on this one. This one actually turned out really great with those teeth. I don't know why that is. I think it's just they're carved in deeper and they're, a little bit better to scale, and they're just shaped a bit better than this one. Alright, so now we got our figure here positioned in frame with the Banpresto 25 approximate centimeter high figure and the X Plus 30 centimeter series figure. So even for an X Plus 30 centimeter series figure, this is a big figure here. So you can see that he really makes this one look tiny, because when I was first, purchasing him, I did actually expect him to be a tiny bit bigger. So it was a tiny bit of a letdown to see that he was such a small figure. But even out of these three figures, I think just for the sculpt, it is done well enough to perhaps warrant the purchase, even for the prices it's going for now. I know they're really steep, but it really depends how much of a 54 fan you are. As you can see, I'm a pretty big into my 54 Godzillas, because he is one of, if not my most favorite design. We can kind of compare him with the X Plus here. Again, this X Plus has that thing with the spines where something just looks really off. This spine is falling down this way. The spines also they're not refined as well. They're made really rough, which they should be, but they should be rough just around the middle. The tips should be smoother and more bone-like, which they are on this figure, and they definitely were on the Monster Arts figure. But that is another thing that I actually prefer the spines on this little Bandai vinyl compared to this figure here. The face is also more accurate, I'd say, on the Bandai vinyl. Something about the X Plus face never looked quite right to me. It's a great figure and really close to what he looked like in the film, but just in general, he's not... I wouldn't say he's, perfect. I don't think he's the definitive 54 Godzilla figure for sure, but a great figure nonetheless. But this just gives you guys kind of a nice comparison between the two. So don't expect this guy to be massive. In fact, I'll just show you guys that he is... So he stands at about exactly just over 19 centimeters tall. And in inches, that's about 7.5, just a bit taller than 7.5 inches, if you can see that there. Well, that's a good indication of his height for you guys. Since we're talking about sizing and the height of this figure, let's do one of them old-fashioned size comparison montages, which are so damn awesome. Alright guys, I do hope you enjoyed that little size comparison there and you got to see how this guy scales with some of your other basic Godzilla figures. So he is in this sort of kind of strange mid-range height where he doesn't scale with most things. Probably the closest figure he really scaled with was actually the KKK Godzilla, so the this guy right here, the lights, music, and sound, or whatever he's called, however it translates to in English, the 1989 Godzilla here from Monster Arts, the really big one. So he did scale pretty close to this guy, but other than that, he's definitely kind of in this strange height range where not much else really goes with him. But, you know, that is fitting, seeing as this guy is the only Godzilla in the original film. But, you know, if you want to pair him with something, that is a little bit of a letdown. And I also feel that, especially for the price, this guy is a little bit on the short side. I was kind of hoping that he would scale up to be at least about the same height as, like, that GMK Bandai vinyl or something like that. So just a couple of centimeters higher would have been nice, just to give this guy a little bit more presence. Because he does feel small compared to your big figures, but he does feel big compared to your small figures. It's a really kind of strange scaling. In total, though, I'm not really sure what I would say about recommending this guy to you guys. On the one hand, the figure itself I absolutely adore. As a 54 fan, I think this is a really good collectible. It's definitely, like, above the standard Bandai vinyl quality. It's kind of like a mix, even, between a Bandai vinyl and an X Plus, like I mentioned, quality-wise and sculpt-wise. The sculpt is beautiful. The painting is really nice and refreshing to see color on a 54 figure, because as cool as black and white 54 figures are for movie accuracy, it's just a really cool sort of concept to have them in this color, especially with the nice brown tint and all of that sort of stuff. So that's all great. I just love this thing as an object. Like I said, when I first saw photos of it, I just was obsessed. I'm like, I have to get this thing. I don't care what it costs me. And cost me it did. But, yeah, it's really hard to recommend this thing at the prices it's going for, because they are not, objectively, this thing is not worth those prices. You could easily get a Monster Arts figure, which, the 54 Monster Arts, I'd say, is, the detailing and the sculpt work on it, for example, I think are equally, if not better. They're sharper. It's, a Yuji Sakai sculpt. He nails it. But some of the details, I'd say, are a little bit off about the 54, such as the spines here look a bit weird here, and just the way the joints are constructed in the head, and the what'd you call it, the jaw here. It makes it look a little bit different from how he should, I feel, if he were one cohesive solid. It's really hard to say which one of these I prefer. I think there are two figures that I'm really happy to have in my collection, but for most people, I would just say go for the Monster Arts 54. But if you're a crazy obsessive of the actual original Gojira design, then this is a figure which I do recommend you track down, and I wish you the best of luck at finding it for a decent price. So yeah, before I close off the review, I'll just kind of give you guys a nice look at this guy. I'll just push away those buildings because they do get in the way. If you are interested, I do have videos on how I make these little buildings on my channel. They're really cool to display your figures with, but we'll just kind of give you guys a quick look at his detailing since I turned on a lamp just to help give you guys a slightly different impression of what he looks like with different shadows. So, yeah, really neatly done. Love the scaling, especially down his legs and body here. And aside from, like I said, the slight softness of the spines, the sculpt there, it's really immaculate and really screen accurate. So yeah, that is it for this little review, guys. Don't forget to like and or subscribble, because it's always awesome when you guys do that. It really helps out the channel, and I genuinely appreciate that stuff from you guys. And just in general, make sure all your vinyl is a radiated vinyl. Keep on rocking, people. Peace out. Bye.